Hello, everyone. Yate. I'm Helena Deswood. I'm the tribal coordinator for the Southwest Climate Hub. Thank you for joining us this evening for the drought monitoring webinar series. It's a collaborative effort between our guest speakers, the Drought Learning Network, the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project, and the Southwest Climate Hub. The webinars will be recorded and posted on our website and our social media pages as well. During the presentation, you may enter your questions in the chat. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session. You can ask your questions at that time as well. At the very end, we'll have a survey poll. We'd like your feedback as it is important for us to plan future webinar events. The USDA Climate Hubs links USDA research and program agencies in the regional delivery of tools and information to agricultural producers and professionals. The Southwest Climate Hub is located down in at the Jornada Experimental Range in Las Cruces, New Mexico. The Drought Learning Network is a peer-to-peer knowledge exchange between climate service providers and resource managers. The main goal of the Drought Learning Network is to gather and share lessons learned from drought events to improve response to future drought events. Currently, we have 4 working groups: the Indigenous Collaborations, Monitoring and Impact Reporting, Drought in Agriculture, and Sharing Management Practice. And if you'd like to join any of these working groups, we meet every other month. You can just send me an email at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Mikal as well.
Thank you, Helena. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see a lot of faces that are on here tonight for our presentation. I would just like to go ahead and introduce myself and also welcome our NSA project and share with you kind of a little summary about who we are as a project. So my name is Mikkel Lantana Silversmith. I am the project coordinator for the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project, and I just want to thank everyone for coming on here tonight for our second part of our drought monitoring series. Today we have the U.S. Drought Monitor and other drought monitoring and preparedness tools. So our presenter will go ahead and introduce himself right after we go ahead and give our introductions. But before I hand over the floor to Curtis, I'd like to share with you guys all a quick introduction to who we are as a project. For some of you that are new on here, we're called the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project. In short, we're called the NSA Project. We're funded by the USDA Outreach and Assistance for Native Farmers and Ranchers and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers Program. So mainly our main goals are to help producers with resources to help them improve their operations, both profitability and sustainability. Over the couple weeks that we had, we deliver workshops that's based on reviews that we gather from producers, whether it is related to animal or livestock animal husbandry. It can go from sheep and goat vaccination or lamb castration, or it can involve cattle marketing. And let's say we do record keeping as well. So some of the main topics that we provide a lot here in the McKinley County, San Juan County area. And that's where kind of our expertise lies, is the livestock management aspect of things and sharing our resources. And not only do we share our resources, but we also have partners such as the Dene College Land Grant Office and the NMSU CES specialists that also done research, and this is part of their job to share what they had researched for a while and share it with producers. So we use their expertise as well through conducting workshops in person and through our webinars that we provide twice a month. Not to mention, we also have a conservation planning program, but if you want to go deeper dive into that and you are a grazing permittee that resides in McKinley or San Juan County, we can definitely help you if you have a grazing permit or agricultural land use permit. And one of the requirements for you is to have a completed basic conservation plan. And definitely we can help you out with that. We do that free of charge. And that is also in a collaboration effort with the Dene College Land Grant Office. Another goal of ours is increasing our producers' knowledge in USDA programs. I'm sure all of you are well aware of NRCS and FSA programs. We host virtual fairs to give the USDA local field offices to share some of their local programs that producers can apply for, whether they are ranchers looking to apply for drought loss assistance or even crop disaster assistance. And they even apply for EQIP under NRCS, and there's more. And lastly, our goal is to help increase the local food production in areas that we serve, just as I have mentioned from the beginning, McKinley, San Juan, and Cibola counties. For our garden projects, we use the expertise from another great partner of ours is COPE, which is Community Outreach and Patient Empowerment. So we use a lot of their expertise when it comes to gardening and seed preparation, seed selection, what the steps it will go for spring vegetable gardening and more. So definitely currently we're providing insight on other gardening in person, mostly with schools and hopefully, senior centers, and we can also do family gardens. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the introduction. So my name is Curtis Riganti. I'm a climatologist at the National Drought Mitigation Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm one of the U.S. Drought Monitor authors for the National Drought Monitor Map. So today I'd like to discuss with you all just a few different topics. Primarily, we'll be going over just what the Drought Monitor Map is and how it's made for anyone who's not in the audience who's not familiar with that process. Then we'll do an overview of some of the different tools that we have here at the National Drought Mitigation Center that you might find useful. We'll do just a quick demonstration of what you can find on different parts of our website near the end, time permitting. So, and obviously take some questions. So I'll go ahead and get started here. So first, just a quick overview of who we are at the NDMC. So what we do is multifaceted. We're a multidisciplinary organization here at the University of Nebraska. So what we're really trying to do is basically take drought information, whether it be drought monitoring like we do with the US Drought Monitor and different products that we use that help us make the drought monitor, for instance, and early warning information. And then we kind of mix this with some of our policy and planning suggestions that we help people with. We also have people on staff who do vulnerability and risk assessment. And then we basically package this information through the center and give this to different groups of people, whether it be educators, students, policy and decision makers, the media, tribal nations, other scientists, state, the general public, whoever really wants to use the information. So specifically for my background is as a meteorologist and a physical scientist. So some of these different projects I'm not as involved in. I'm more involved with some of the tech and physical science side here. But if you have any more in-depth questions about some of the other things that we do here at the NDMC, there's plenty of people that I can bring questions to and put in contact with you. So this is just a list of some of our partners here that you can see really quickly. So again, we work with NIDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the UN, USAID, just to name a few. So again, just a quick overview of some of our planning tools that we have. So we'll go over this briefly near the end, but we have pamphlets for managing drought risks on ranches, which I think people might find helpful, and we look at that on multiple different scales, starting with a local scale. And so we do look at areas such as tribal nations, states, watershed basins. Again, we're kind of looking at all different scales and all different time scales here. And then otherwise, we also have education information on drought, such as just really basics, Drought for Kids, so you can use some of this information in a classroom. We have drought games where we basically have little activities that teach people how to plan for drought, to more in-depth information about drought as well. So, and then, so I kind of alluded to some of what we do is also decision-making support. So one of the primary tools for that is the US Drought Monitor, but there are also different types of data sets that we use when creating the US Drought Monitor map. And so first, the next topic we'll get into is the making of the US Drought Monitor, but I wanted to show you guys first. So we have a website. I don't think I'm going to have time to get this at the end, but it's agandrought.unl.edu. And if you go there, you can see for different types of crops and different types of agriculture that you can do, those areas that tend to have that agriculture, you can overlay that with different drought levels. We also have our Drought Risk Atlas tool, which we might get to at the end. This has a lot of historical drought information with historical climate and hydrology information. That's been a project that I've done some work with recently, especially looking at long-term trends in drought, which has been a hot topic across North America, especially in the West recently. And then we do have other types of more specific drought monitoring tools that we use, for instance, as inputs to the US Drought Monitor. So, pardon me. So we'll go ahead and get into what the US Drought Monitor is. So just first idea here, for a long time, scientists, we've been trying to monitor and map drought conditions. And so usually when you think about drought, you're thinking about basically a deficit of water in different parts of the water cycle compared to what's needed. And usually you'll think of this as to what are we used to having in this location at this time of year. So this is just a map from, looks like August of 1934. That's just a kind of map of, in the opinion of whoever was making this, what types of drought impacts are being seen in different areas. Obviously, that's going to look different depending on what sector you're interested in. For instance, drought is going to look different at a ski resort somewhere from what it will look like on a ranch or in an island in the Pacific Ocean, where there a lot of what they care about with drought is water catchment. So we're trying to monitor drought in all these different locations using different types of statistics. So this is from 2000 through 2021 from a recent paper. This is just looking at what areas have tended to be in some level of dryness or drought. So we'll get into this momentarily, but we have 5 different basically dryness levels that we identify on the US Drought Monitor map every week. They range from abnormal dryness or D0 up through exceptional drought. By definition, as you go towards the more red colors, the worst drought, these are more rare events. So I did want to draw your attention just from 2000 to 2021, we've seen some of the highest counts of the number of days in the United States for at least D0 or abnormally dry conditions, kind of centered over this northeast part of Arizona here and some of the surrounding areas around the Four Corners. So definitely an important topic in this area. So when we're making the drought monitor, what we're trying to do is it's a hybrid approach here between different physical indicators and indices, basically reports of what's going on in the ground, direct measurements of things such as groundwater or soil moisture or rainfall or snow depth. And then we take some of that physical data and we create drought indices from them too. So we're computing either statistics directly off of the precipitation data and comparing that to historical data at a location to come up with some different metrics we use, or combining that different pieces of information, such as was the total precipitation over the last month at this weather station, and what was the temperature every day at this weather station. We come up with like a combined index that looks at what's the balance for incoming rainfall versus what may have been lost to evaporation and transpiration. Then we have different indicators that are just kind of more direct information, but also these derived statistical indices. But also we need help really interpreting that data on a local scale. So we also reach out to local experts who can help us basically take a critical eye to the statistical data that we're looking at as meteorologists and climatologists in different areas. So I'll get into how that process works soon here. So with the drought monitor, it is a continuous development. So I've been doing the drought monitor myself personally for roughly the last 5 or 6 years. And in that time, again, my background is as a meteorologist. A lot of like the research I did as an undergraduate and graduate student was in severe storms. So I kind of came into the field of climatology from that. And I've kind of seen over the last 5 or 6 years how the development of the drought monitor has evolved a little bit. So we're always taking feedback from people on how the product is useful, what changes they want to see to it. And then we're also working with scientists who are coming up with new types of statistics and metrics that can be used to monitor drought. One thing more specific over the last several years is that we've seen really a ballooning of different metrics that help us measure flash drought, really rapid drying in different areas, and that look at the impact of high temperatures, high winds, high amounts of solar radiation, and what that does to quickly dry out conditions. So we've been kind of changing what types of statistics we look at to monitor that over the last several years because new data sets have become available that help us do that. So the drought monitor map is, and you've seen the map on a couple different scales, so we'll just look at the map here in a moment, but in a nutshell, what we're trying to do is represent all types of droughts on one map. So we kind of define, I won't get into, just for the sake of time, really in depth into any of these, but we look at, again, drought on different scales, both in time and space, and in different sectors. So for instance, a meteorological drought, what you're usually thinking about is how much precipitation have we had maybe over the last few months? How does that compare to normal? When you're going into agricultural drought, we're looking at, okay, how is that impacting? If we're seeing a deficit in precipitation and increased temperatures, we're going to start looking at data sets that look at how that impacts different types of agriculture, basically. So what's happening to the soil moisture? If it's say corn or wheat or some other type of crop, is that crop drying out? Is it struggling because of the lack of water? And so we have different satellite-based metrics as well as more classical meteorological variables that we'll look at to analyze that. Then you get into hydrological drought, which is more long-term types of drought usually, and you're looking at what's happening to long-term stream flow or reservoir levels or groundwater and deeper soil moisture profiles based on lack of water or maybe a surplus in one time, but a lack of water over a longer period of time. So you can have meteorological, like short-term drought amid a relatively moderate or even wet long-term signal and vice versa. We also define ecological and socioeconomic drought. For the sake of time, I won't get too much into what these are, but again, we're kind of trying to define a bunch of different types of drought that work on different temporal scales and put them all on one map, which obviously is a little bit of a challenge. So what the drought monitor is, so first, if you go to droughtmonitor.unl.edu or just Google US Drought Monitor, you'll find this. So it's hosted here at the National Drought Mitigation Center. It's part of a throughway partnership between us, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So it's used in several different USDA programs, used by the IRS for tax deferrals, and there are many other programs that have started using the USDM in official capacities. So some of those USDA programs, for instance, you have trying to remember the name of some of the programs off the top of my head here. I'll get back to that when I do remember it, but takeaway is that the drought monitor is used in a bunch of different things. So it's a participatory process where there are different partners. We have certain standards that we're using when we're creating the map and a shared methodology between all of us. There are 11 people who are national authors right now. And so each of us, we're using the same methodology when we do the map. So I'll get into what that is here. So just what's on the map first. So The drought monitor map is showing the extent of drought spatially over the country, the intensity. So again, the more dark red colors are showing more extreme drought, which by definition, what this means is that the more red colors, the warmer colors on the map are showing areas that are more unusually dry compared to the history at that location. We're also looking at relative duration of the drought. Again, this is for that local area, but generally we have, you see these black lines on the map here, and then these S, L, L, and S labels. So what these mean is that we're trying to show basically short-term drought, long-term drought, or a combination thereof. So this area of the Southern High Plains, for instance, would be in both short and long-term drought. Apologies. As part of Northeast or Northwest New Mexico here, the map, this is back from April 2023, would have identified strictly long-term drought, which again, usually you're starting to see more ecological drought and hydrological drought impacts when you're looking at drought signals longer than 6 months. Short-term drought, you're looking at more impacts to agriculture, grasslands. You can have both too at the same time, or one and not the other. So each of these drought categories I alluded to, by definition, they're showing how unusually dry an area is compared to its own local weather, climate, hydrological history. So more specifically, each of these drought categories corresponds to a range of percentiles. So what we're doing is when we have an area that's, say, listed in severe drought or D2, what we're saying is that most of, or really at least a plurality of your statistics that we're using to depict the type of drought that's going on there. So let's say it's short-term drought. Most of those statistics and different indicators and indices are going to converge to the 6th to 10th percentile if we have an area in severe drought. Whereas in moderate drought, maybe we're sitting less severe in the 11th to 20th percentile. Exceptional drought, the rarest type, by definition, we're sitting in the 1st or 2nd percentile. So it's something that you'd expect to have a pretty wide recurrence. So it shouldn't happen very often, just statistically speaking. It is important to keep in mind that with a lot of the different statistics that we use, especially some of the more remote sensed ones, some of those have shorter periods of record. So whenever we're coming up with percentiles for these different types of data, you are occasionally going to be looking at different lengths of time when defining those percentiles. So maybe the same type of data for one data set for another may show different percentiles if the amount of time that we're comparing the current data to over is different between one data set and another. But the whole idea with this, again, is to directly communicate how unusually dry an area is, or said another way, put dryness into a historical perspective. So you can kind of think of these different categories in terms of a recurrence interval. Your abnormal dryness you'd expect to occur once every 3 to 5 years, moderate drought every 5 to 10 years, severe drought 10 to 20 years, and so on, with your exceptional drought being a 50 to 100-year event. And if you recall, parts of the Southwest US, especially kind of parts of Northeast New Mexico, Northeast Arizona, pardon me, and Northwest New Mexico, that area was really lighting up with a lot of days of at least abnormal dryness, certainly more than you'd expect for the period of record, indicating that this area, again, has seen a lot of more dryness than one would expect randomly over the past couple decades. So we're looking at multiple types of data when we're making the drought monitor map. So because we're looking at different types of drought, we're not just looking at incoming precipitation or what's being lost to evaporation or the impact of, say, when snowpack is melting, how much of it there is, or the impact on stream flow or vegetation health. We're trying to take all of this data and put it onto one map. So by definition, then, when we're looking at the entire water cycle and statistics that explain what's going on in different parts of the water cycle, often they're going to give us a different signal. So maybe our precipitation at 1 month is going to show normal conditions, but at 6 months, if you go back and look at the last 6 months, you might be in severe or extreme dryness. Maybe your stream flow data shows moderate dryness at a 7-day interval, but if you look at the average over the last month, maybe it's extreme dryness. So again, we have all these different data sets that we're trying to see what do they converge on. It's somewhat rare that they're all going to show the same kind of level of drought. So, and it's kind of a holistic view that we're trying to take. So that's what we call a convergence of evidence then. So we're looking at all these different physical indicators and indices at different points in the water cycle, and we're seeing what level do they converge on. And we have different types of drought that can help us to figure that out. This is also where local impacts come in and local expertise comes in. So if say I'm doing the drought monitor map and I'm looking at an area of the country that I don't know very well, just because I've personally lived in the Midwest and Great Plains my whole life, so I may not know as much about the climate and hydrology of northern Arizona, for instance. So someone on a local level can help me interpret some of the data a lot better than I might be able to just looking at the data on my own. That's an example of this. I think there was one time where I was working on the drought monitor in Utah several years ago, and I was looking at stream flow data in, I want to say, the Wasatch Range or maybe the LaSalle Mountains. And I saw that there was an increase in stream flow at one point. I want to say it was like in April or May, and I didn't realize that. And I thought like, oh, maybe the drought conditions have improved there. And there was someone on a local level then who was able to tell me, well, this is actually melting off earlier than what we're used to. So the stream flow really should crash several weeks later. So again, we're looking for people on a local level to help us kind of take a critical eye to the data too. So each week we work on the drought monitor map Monday through Wednesday. We iterate through different drafts with people on a local level. They'll often send us suggestions, especially on a state level, and then we'll iterate through draft. They'll tell us this based on this data, we think this should be changed on the map, and then I'll do that change, or I'll say I disagree because I see this in the data. What do you think about that? So over the course of 2.5 days, we're iterating through all that data until usually early to mid Wednesday afternoon, or maybe late Wednesday morning. Start this usually on Monday. Once that data is submitted, that usually gets finalized sometime during the day Wednesday, and then it gets released to the public early Thursday morning. Once the map is released, it's in its final form, and we'll make further changes to it the following week if they're necessary. So another thing to note about the drought monitor that I haven't yet, because it takes so much time for us to sit down and kind of sift through all this data around the country, we're looking at data that's valid through early Tuesday morning. So let's say an area got 4 inches of rain on Tuesday afternoon, and that's an area that was maybe in extreme drought. Let's say that 4 inches alleviated some long-term precipitation deficits. You're not going to see that show up until the next week's map because we're only looking at data each week through early Tuesday morning. So again, USDM process. We have 11 of us right now at different centers across the country. So we always have to be at a regional or national center or government academia research. So all of us are, strictly speaking, volunteers for this. Then we have one person at the Desert Research Institute at the University of Nevada, Reno, 4 of us currently at the University of Nebraska here at NDMC, and then several NOAA employees and a USDA employee in North Carolina and Maryland and Washington, D.C. So as I quickly alluded to earlier, we are sending the drafts of the map back to get local feedback to help us kind of take a critical eye to the data. So this is just a map of where people in how many people we tend to have in different locations. This is as of a year ago, so this is not the most up-to-date information, but this gives you an idea of kind of the distribution around the country of who's on this email list that we iterate with each week when we make the drought monitor map. We have over 400 people on that. So lots of local experts who are giving their input. So I'm just going to quickly run through this. When we're making changes to the drought monitor each week, we try to limit that to one category in either direction. We want the map to reflect how people are going to use it. We want it to be easy to use. We want our website to be easy to use. So we're always taking feedback on how that works, and we'll look at a couple of those tools. So then when we take in data at the beginning of the week, we're overlaying this in GIS software such that basically I'll see just a layer that has all the different drought severity lines, and then I can line up what some of our precipitation data, whether it be radar based or weather station based, what are some of the different soil moisture models show, what does the satellite data show, and I can overlay all that information on top of each other, show that data as percentiles, and then use that to kind of visually move the lines around. So, and just to give you an idea, lots of different stuff goes into this. This is a bit of a loud graphic, but just to give you an idea of how many different statistics we tend to look at each week, especially when you consider that we're looking around the country for this. So again, we alluded to this earlier. More recently, we've been looking at more hydrologic drought and short-term drought. And lots of different products have come out recently that help us look at these types of things. We have another product called the Forest Drought Index that we're kind of iterating through different testing with right now that'll be coming soon. And then all of the other products that you see here are already available. Some of these, like Quick Dry and Veg Dry and Grace, come from or through our shop here at the University of Nebraska. Others are available through NOAA or other places too. And this is a bit of a review, but basically we start the map Monday morning, look at the previous week's map, identify areas that we might need to change. Usually the previous author will also send us an email to the next author saying, hey, I didn't have time to look at this area as closely, or I got some emails from people on a local level saying, hey, you really need to look at this area for next week. So oftentimes we'll start with information like that. We'll download the physical data. We'll create a draft map after weighing all the evidence, send that out to people, see what they say, and then iterate through that for a couple of days until we have a final product. So drought impact information, that has been playing a large role in how we do the map. Strictly speaking, drought impacts do not on their own change the map. This is because the different categories line up to percentiles of physical data, which we don't really have for drought impacts right now, but they are part of the puzzle. The way I like to say is that having impact information helps the authors take a critical eye to the data. As just a general example, there are probably at least 3 different soil moisture data sets that I like to look at when I'm making the drought monitor map. And let's say that they all show different information in terms of how severely dry soil profiles are in different layers. So if I have an impact report from a location saying like, hey, our soils are really dry down to say 6 inches, and I've lived here 50 years, I've only seen this 3 other times in these different years, I'm going to be biased then towards believing what a model shows that hey, we're really severely dry here compared to maybe a couple other data sets that don't show that, because I got an impact report that kind of helped direct, hey, this is what's actually going on in the ground. So it's not by itself, it's not something that's statistically robust, but it does help kind of direct what areas we need to be looking at and maybe give us a better idea of this is what people are seeing on the ground. So again, there are over 150 maps that we can look at when we're making the drought monitor. So it's a lot of stuff to look through. So and just for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of speed through the last few things here. Over the course of time, you'll see large changes to drought levels, but usually week to week, you'll only see one category in any direction, if any changes at all for certain areas. Occasionally, you'll see a 2-category improvement if you had a really significant rain event that we think was able to, say, replenish soil moisture, stock ponds and reservoirs, groundwater. But usually you'll very rarely, if ever, see a 2-category degradation, just because drought is a kind of more long-term type of disaster. So usually things don't happen quick enough that our statistics are going to switch by more than one category week to week. So what's kind of coming down the pike here with the drought monitor? So first, the project that we're currently working on right now here at the NDMC is to have a repository of all the different weekly data sets that we used when making the drought monitor stored in-house. So we usually share this data with a weekly maps product where anyone can go look at some examples of the types of maps that we're using when making the drought monitor. We also have this objective blends tool where we're trying to analyze how to weigh different drought statistics to come up with a short-term drought blend or a long-term drought blend or even a flash drought blend. So we'll look at that in a moment here. But I want to move on quickly to, so I've been talking a little bit about, I want to check the time here. I've been talking a little bit about looking at drought reports and local impacts reports. So if you go to go.unl.edu/Seymour_drought, well, actually, let's go ahead and look at this in a web browser soon. But this is a system that we have here at the National Drought Mitigation Center where anyone can go in and submit a report of what they're seeing on the ground in their area. We're really looking for people to submit multiple kind of regular reports over time because we want to know what drought impacts or lack thereof look like in both dry, normal, and even wet conditions, so we can kind of build a more complete picture. So you can also look at, in addition to just submitting a report and this is what I'm seeing, you can also see what other people in your area and around the country have submitted. So just for the sake of time, I am going to pull up a few of these different data sets here. So first, since we were looking at the drought impact reporter, I'm going to go to go.unl.edu/Seymour here. And can people still see my screen here? Should be a Chrome web browser
Yes.
now?
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
very good. So there are 2 different ways to use the Seymour system here. So I'm going to go ahead and, just because we're using a web browser, open that in a browser, but you can also use the Survey 123 Field app for this. So if we open a web browser here, what this will usually look like, and I'm going to say block for now, but it'll ask you where you are, and then just a bunch of different questions about what location are you in. It'll ask you some more kind of qualitative questions about how dry or wet it is, and then you'll also get a lot more specific questions that you can provide information on. How is drought affecting you in your area? You can check different boxes to say, like, for instance, we're seeing this type of crop that's experienced damage due to dry conditions, or maybe you've had flooding. You can say it's been too wet and we've had crop damage due to that. So, but again, this drought impact system Seymour is useful because we're also looking at different types of drought in this, and we're asking for different types of drought reports. So, and you can submit agricultural information, but we're looking for drought reports that kind of cover the whole spectrum of drought impacts too. So given that it's 7:13 my time, I can be happy to take more questions about Seymour at the end, but I'm going to move on to just different ways to look at the drought monitor map. So if you Google the US Drought Monitor or go to droughtmonitor.unl.edu, this is what the page will look like when you pull up the current map. So kind of exciting right now. We don't have a lot of drought going on across the US as a whole. Here in the Navajo Nation area, though, we are seeing some long-term abnormal dryness remaining. And so we'll go ahead and let's just say look at different ways that we can look at the map on a more localized perspective. So I can pull up a map of just Arizona if I want. But I can also go to our map archive tool here. So you see over here, and you can pull up different types of areas. So for instance, the default for this is national or geographic regions. But if you click on tribal areas, you can pull up the US Drought Monitor map for all of these different tribal areas under this drop-down menu here. So then when you do this, you'll get geospatial statistics showing how much of an area is in a specific level of drought right now, last week, and then at different intervals of time in the past. We also have this available as a zoomable map, and I'm going to pull that up here momentarily, pardon me. So if you go to Maps, Map Viewer, so what you can see here is all the different drought monitor categories. Again, I'm going to zoom in over here on the Four Corners area. I can pull up different reference areas here. So under reference, and I'm going to go to tribal lands, turn that on, and you can see the GIS layer for that now. Just for another geo reference, I'm going to turn a state's boundary on. So now you can see on a larger scale how much area drought, different levels of drought and abnormal dryness cover with respect to all these different geopolitical boundaries. You can turn on river basins, counties, National Weather Service regions, lots of different things here. So another tool that we have here at the NBMC that folks might find useful is called GrassCast. I'm not sure how much of the audience here is familiar with this, but the general idea behind GrassCast is that we have it's either a weekly or bi-weekly updating product that based on historical forage data from different ranches around the Great Plains and then around Arizona and New Mexico. So we have historical forage production and historical precipitation data. And so those are statistically combined to give it the product where we can say, based on how much rain has already fallen during the growing season so far, under 3 different basically types of scenarios moving forward, how confident can we be that we're going to see above or below normal forage production? How much above or below normal biomass production should we be able to see in different locations? So this is a forecast that, yeah, it would be every other week here. So this is the forecast made on May 28th of this year. So you can zoom onto that, and I'll provide a link to the website. It's grasscast.unl.edu. So you can see the color bar here showing that, for instance, parts of Northeast Arizona, and I believe this is on Navajo Nation lands here, would be seeing more likely to see above normal forage production for this year if we have above normal precipitation the rest of the year, but also if we're seeing near normal precipitation. And I'm not actually sure how updated some of these maps are, so pardon me if this information is not completely up to date. I'm going to look into that when we're done here. But needless to say, one way that you can use these maps is try to figure out, based on what's already fallen and based on historical forage data, am I more likely to see above or below normal forage production in my area based on these 3 different scenarios, either near normal precipitation, above normal, or below normal. So you can, should be one tool among many that you use when making decisions about ranching. But one way that you can use this is you can consider, okay, even if we get below normal precipitation the rest of the year, we're highly confident, if we still have relatively high confidence that based on what's already fallen, we're going to have near or above normal forage production, you might be able to use that as part of your decision-making process. Conversely, if say you've had well below normal rainfall so far, you can look at this product and say, well, assuming a best case scenario of above normal rainfall moving forward, we still at best would expect to see slightly below normal forage production. Maybe I'm going to be more pessimistic in my decision making. You can also look at tools such as forecasts moving forward from the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center that do like 1 and 3 month precipitation outlook. So then you can kind of use these tools in tandem to say, well, looking forward, for instance, from about a month ago through June, July, and August, the forecast leans towards slightly below normal precipitation in this region. So maybe you'd use that and say, when I'm looking at grass cast, maybe this below normal precipitation is most likely to hit. So what does the map show is most likely to occur if that happens? So that's kind of a quick high level overview. We also have ranch plans for basically drought planning on a ranch level here at NDMC. I was not directly involved in putting this together, but I'd be happy to provide a link to this. And the general idea is that we're trying to help people manage drought risk on ranches. A lot of our examples for this from the Great Plains, but we can use this guide just for general ranch planning. So I think there are a couple other tools, but I realize it's about 7:20 Central Time, and I want to leave a bit of time for questions, so I'll go ahead and cut that off. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Curtis. Do we have any questions from the audience?
I have a question.
Yes.
So Curtis, going back, if you can, maybe you've moved from this, but
Mhm.
from the US Drought Monitor, can you
Mhm.
go over the statistics? Is
Sure.
that start of water year to current? Is that like the current year, like from January all the way to December?
Yeah,
Or
so when we're talking, I want to make sure I understand your question. So are you asking about water year statistics in
yeah, like
general?
what can you go in depth in that?
Yeah. So when we're talking about a water year, by definition, you're looking at from the previous, whatever the most recent October 1st is. So right now, the current water year for any location would go back to looking at statistics from October 1st, 2023. So
Oh,
these
okay.
area changes here, what we're doing is we're taking the drought monitor map that's, I guess it looks like closest to and also before October 1st, the most recent October 1st, so 2023, and looking at what's changed from that September 26th map to now. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and is that mainly the percentages like in the drought, the drought one stage, the moderately drought, that would mean on my end, I have McKinley County on my side.
Mhm.
That would say 55% is currently in drought, right? Is that how it reads?
Yeah,
Like,
so you're looking at which county specifically? We can probably try to, as a demonstration, pull that up here, but can you repeat that part of the question? Sorry.
so on my side, I was just I'm on the US drought monitor as well, and I'm
Mhm.
looking at McKinley County
Okay.
in New Mexico.
Mhm.
And for our area, we're listed as drought one, but for going down to statistics, and currently that would read that we're 55 percentage of in drought, right? Is that how I'm reading
Yes.
it?
Yes.
And okay, all right.
Right. So right now, this is saying that just over 55% of McKinley County is in moderate drought conditions. So the default is cumulative percent areas. So this is this D0 through D4 here. So if we
Uh-huh.
scroll back up to the county, it's 96% of the county is covered by at least D0. So that's adding both up the yellow area and the kind of brownish area here. So that's
Hmm.
just saying that remaining 4% is just this little corner down here. So that's
Okay.
not in at least D0. So
And how is the estimated population like fit into this? It is coming from that census data, right?
I believe so. Was not involved in any of the mapping and statistics for that specifically.
Oh,
I can
okay.
ask the people who would have made those calculations. I unfortunately don't know exactly how that was made, so.
Okay, that's
But yeah,
interesting.
my guess would be that, oh, I don't want to guess it at all. I'll ask someone to be sure about that, so.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Curtis.
Yep.
Curtis, when you were showing the tribal maps,
Mhm.
is there a way to because for Napa Nation specifically, it excludes the Hopi Reservation as well on that image. Is there a way to toggle that on and off? I know you showed another map where you can
Yes, so you
toggle
can,
selections
yeah,
on it.
yeah. So if you're looking at the static maps, you can just pick different tribal areas, for instance, and that's just going to show that area, not necessarily with other geographic references around that. On this map viewer, though, you can turn that on and off. I don't know of a way to turn specific tribal boundaries off with respect to other ones. Like, I don't know if I can, I don't think there's a way that I can toggle, like just see the Navajo Nation lands on here, or just see the Hopi Nation lands and none others on here.
With this map right here that you have on the screen,
Mhm.
you can download that image, right?
Let's see here. Scroll around for a moment. I'm not sure exactly how to download this image. I would suggest taking a screen capture of it. I'm not sure if there's a direct way that you can do just like what you see on the screen right now, download that. If you want, if you want these types of maps that are just showing specific tribal areas, those can be downloaded. For something like this, I would probably do just a screen capture of the area that you're interested in.
Are there any more questions? If so, go ahead and unmute yourself. We have also launched the survey poll as well. Go ahead and fill that out. Yes,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. Can you share that link again where we can submit our report?
Yes, I'm gonna go ahead and put that in here.
Okay, thank you.
And so I'm actually going to go ahead and put in an email address. So Kelly Smith, she's one of another coworker here who helps head up the team that works with Seymour, and she's usually the person who presents on that tool. So any more up-to-date information, I think you'd want to reach out to her. She probably wouldn't mind if I shared her email address in the chat here. So I'm going to do that here. I think there's a number 2. I'm going to Google that really quick. Yeah, there's a number 2 there. So ksmith2@unl.edu. There's Seymour. I'd be happy to take Seymour questions too, but some of the more complicated ones are probably going to be passed along to her. So let's go ahead and share her contact information there.
Thank you, Curtis.
Yeah.
Very informative.
Glad to hear that. So
Yes, thank you, Curtis. That was really good presentation. I enjoyed it.
very good. Glad to hear it.
So I will go ahead and share my screen one last time before we close out. So once again, thanks for joining us this evening. This webinar will be recorded and posted on our websites and social medias. Our next webinar will be July 9th, FSA programs from McKinley County. And then the final one, July 18th, Kokoraz Network. And if you would like to reach us, here is our contact information. Mikhail Silversmith, Shirley Toth from NAPO Sustainable Ag Project, and myself, Helena Desodak, the Southwest Climate Hub.